Readers, when it comes to James Bond, I never really had that big of a connection with him as an action hero. Yes, it was cool to learn that Sean Connery was the first to play him, but he was pretty much just Indiana Jones's dad to me. The Roger Moore films were fun and campy, but I didn't really rewatch them like that. And I'll be completely honest with you, the only Pierce Brosnan movie I've ever seen from beginning to end was Die Another Day because Halle Berry. I feel like you want me to elaborate on that. I'm not. Basically, all James Bond movies were to me were the serialized intro screen with the gun barrels, which is a gimmick that I'm a huge sucker for, thanks to every Christopher Reeve Superman movie ending with him flying around the world, stylized opening credit scenes with their own theme songs, which is a form of cinematic camp that I absolutely love, and the rest is pretty much hit or miss. So I went into Casino Royale with the same intention I had when I started playing Kingdom Hearts as a kid. Everyone else has all these Final Fantasy games under their belt, so let me start this new RPG from the first installment so that I can have something. Yes, I'm now aware that's not how Final Fantasy games work because it's an anthology series. You don't have to play Final Fantasy VII to understand Final Fantasy VIII, but you do have to play like 7 other handheld Kingdom Hearts games along with Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 to understand 3. At the end of the day, 'twas I who became Boo Boo the Fool. Thankfully, Daniel Craig's turn at James Bond decided to be a reboot of the franchise, adapting the very first Bond story, Casino Royale, to prove its point. This made getting into Bond, at least for those who grew up in this era, relatively easy, and did something that no other generation of James Bond on film has really done before: use each of its installments with the Bond in question to tell a whole story. And while 3 out of the 5 intro songs are personal bops of mine, and the opening credits for all of them were hella creative compared to the ones I've seen before, the stories each of the Daniel Craig installments had to tell were interesting and felt that they were a natural continuation of the previous, as opposed to the mostly standalone films that came before. Yes, even Quantum of Solace and Spectre. But as I reflect on Daniel Craig's era of James Bond, now that it's complete with its 5th installment, No Time to Die, I now understand what that overall structure is that carries over from Casino Royale to the 2022 film. Because yes, while Craig's Bond films are the action-adventure spy romp one would expect, I want to go over what the 5 films in question actually reflect. And what it reflects is a coming-of-age narrative. Let's begin. Hey readers, Laurent here, offering you analysis and perspective on your favorite bits of geek and pop culture media. If it wasn't obvious from the intro, this video will in fact contain spoilers for all 5 of Daniel Craig's James Bond films. They're currently streaming all over the place. So instead, I'll have affiliate links in the description box below to where you can purchase them or rent them if you don't have them already. Other than that, if you end up liking what I'm putting down after this video is done, there's multiple ways you can show some love. If you want to help financially support the channel, you can join my Patreon. There are multiple tiers that range from $1 to $20 that give you access to things such as copies of my video scripts, early video releases, discount codes to my merchandise store, and a whole lot more. And if you want to hear more about my opinions on Daniel Craig's tenure as Bond, there will be a supplemental material video where I both compliment and critique the first 3 films, Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall, exclusively available to patrons who contribute $10 a month or more. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you'll get a heads up on whenever I post a new video. That's the syllabus. Now, on to the lesson. Here's some real talk about James Bond. What we received from Daniel Craig's time as the character was not what I was expecting. After he took over from Brosnan in Die Another Day, I was pretty much expecting the same old, a fun little action-adventure romp that started off this new reboot of the franchise with the very first serious take of this first adventure adapted on screen. And for the most part, that's exactly what Casino Royale ended up becoming. A modern-day, non-parody take on James Bond's first adventure as a 00 agent for MI6 with all the charm, bravado, and ego you'd expect a freshly made 00 agent named James Bond to be. Then they made Quantum of Solace, an original story that acts as the first direct sequel to a theatrically released James Bond film in, I'm pretty sure, its almost 60-year history. Picking up exactly where Casino Royale left off regarding MI6 trying to get to the bottom of Quantum, the organization responsible for Vesper's betrayal at the end of Casino Royale, while also trying to stop one of its members from taking over the water supply in Bolivia. And a story that I didn't really appreciate all that much when it first came out, real talk. I'll elaborate on that later. Then Skyfall came out, and it looked like we were returning to formula a bit. Because Daniel Craig's Bond was looked at as a reboot thanks to Casino Royale starting at its beginnings, Skyfall succeeded in feeling like a standalone Bond film that took place sometime after the events of Quantum of Solace, but also used it as an opportunity to reintroduce some well-known characters into the franchise, specifically Moneypenny and Q. And while the film's story also served as a way for the franchise to return to the status quo with the eventual return of a male actor portraying M near its end, Skyfall both honored and celebrated Dame Judi Dench for being the first to break it from GoldenEye onward, in a story that was wholly appropriate for it being the swan song of this iteration of the character. Skyfall succeeded in feeling like a standalone film while also using its position to its advantage in order to introduce the traditional building blocks of a Bond film in place as the third installment of a rebooted franchise. From there, the franchise could go as traditionally expected, and for a lot of us fans, that's pretty much what we expected after Skyfall. Modern-day evergreen spy adventure stories that now have all the cards in place thanks to the 3 movies that came before it, establishing its characters, relationships, and experiences necessary in order for them to truly feel like James Bond films. But that's not what Spectre did. Not truly, anyway. While yes, it did provide a way of reintroducing the organization and Bond's arch-nemesis Blofeld into the rebooted version of the franchise, the same way Skyfall did with Moneypenny and Q, it did so by establishing one thing about the entirety of Daniel Craig's career as James Bond. One that would even proceed forward with his last film as the character in No Time to Die. The entirety of Daniel Craig's tenure as Bond is one long narrative, one long continuity. From the moment he gains his 00 status in Casino Royale to his self-sacrifice in No Time to Die. Despite the original intentions for the films in question, Craig's Bond was a constant progression into the character that, because of the standalone formula of the previous iterations, we've never really seen before in the franchise. And this is something that, thanks to how he wanted to tackle his character, Daniel Craig himself was even aware of after the filming of Casino Royale. Promoting No Time to Die on The Late Late Show with James Corbin, Craig said, and I quote, "He felt so complicated, lots of problems. We had this great story at the beginning, Casino Royale, where he falls madly in love with somebody and is betrayed. And every time we came to make another movie, we sometimes said, let's make a standalone, just a Bond movie. And we never could leave that story alone. It always came into the plot. And so somehow we have this narrative all the way through. And that feels very unique, and I'm incredibly proud with the fact that we've done that." End quote. Now, when Craig said "we," he was talking about Neil Purvis and Robert Wade, the two writers and story conceptors that have been on board every single one of Daniel Craig's Bond adventures in order to shape this consecutive narrative over the course of these 5 films. And while the likes of Paul Higgins were on board for Casino Royale and Quantum, John Logan for Skyfall and Spectre, Jez Butterworth for Spectre, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge for No Time to Die, it's safe to say that the responsibility for the narrative structure of Craig's 5-film outing as Bond can be mainly placed on these two. But along with there being a consistent duo of storytellers that were responsible for linking all 5 of these stories together, we also have to take into consideration Craig taking on Bond and the changes he instilled in the character movie after movie, especially since Casino Royale is such a building block to the progression of it, like he says that it is. So I rewatched Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, and Skyfall, and watched Spectre and No Time to Die for the first time with this mindset in place. And now that I know I'm supposed to look at this Bond as a character that progresses and develops with every movie going forward, as opposed to the one and done set it and forget it charisma staples that he's been depicted as in previous films, seeing the way in how Craig handled and dissected Bond, especially in his 5 stories that he was a part of, was very noticeable to me. And how he and the writers chose to collaborate that handling was in the form of a simple question. What if James Bond was a boy? If I were to compare Daniel Craig's James Bond in Casino Royale to anything, it would have to be a boy coming of age to manhood, experiencing the realities of the world for the first time. This analogy is reflected in the narrative, with Bond gaining his 00 status in the MI6, using his mix of charm, investigation, his sense of duty, and his egotistical enthusiasm he developed beforehand to make his mark on the organization, to show that he's ready for the responsibilities being bestowed upon him by M. And for a while, it works out heavily in his favor. He's good at his job, so he makes sure he takes everything into consideration in order for him to finish his mission if he has no choice but to surrender what he wants. His sense of and need for control over the multiple situations leading up to the Miami airport showdown is handled meticulously over the course of the entire investigation. Craig's Bond in the first half of Casino Royale plays very much like a newly christened adult man trying to make something of himself and has all the confidence in the world. One that wholeheartedly believes that you can't tell him shit, and believes the myth that the world truly is his oyster. Yes, I'm aware that mediocre white men already have this mindset about themselves despite being nowhere as skilled as Bond. Can I just finish the analogy, please? Because all of that starts to go out the window once Bond is assigned to bring down the chief proper. Not only is Vesper Lynd slightly immune to his charm, challenges his bullheadedness every opportunity possible, and is just as capable as Bond in analyzing and reading individuals.
It's tailored.
But she's also one of the first individuals chronologically that allows Bond to open up to his more empathetic nature that's present throughout Craig's run on the character. And not just with the women in his 5-movie lifespan, but in regards to the men as well, both friends and colleagues.
Ronson didn't make it, did he?
No.
Then there's the first real instance of what a young Bond not used to having control of the situation he's currently in looks like, when Bond loses his pot because he thought Le Chiffre was bluffing and Vesper refused to buy him back into the game. Before that game, there was all the confidence from Bond in the world. His arrogance and ego caused him to confidently reveal his true name at check-in to Vesper's dismay, and his first risky play was made simply as a way of figuring out how Le Chiffre plays. But then, thanks to Vesper playing Bond for Quantum, and as a result, Spectre, Le Chiffre goads Bond into losing his entire pot because of a bluff misread. This causes him to undo all of the emotional support he previously provided Vesper when she denies him a buy-in because of his impulsiveness.
I can beat this man, you know that.
Get your hand off my arm.
This is the first time we see how Bond acts when he no longer has a sense of control over the situation. You know, when he doesn't have the vice of seducing women as his trump card to temporarily distract from his newly discovered insecurities like he does in Quantum of Solace. And Daniel Craig plays it so well, too. The frustration Bond feels in both Vesper and himself is so potent in the scenes that feature the display. It very much reads that this Bond, even before gaining his 00 status, has never known what it felt like to be denied or have things not work out for him. That same man who first headed out into the world on his own as a fresh adult ready to make it his bitch, got his hand snapped by said world for the first time when he went in to pet it confidently, thinking it wouldn't be aggressive toward him. And as the end of Casino Royale and the majority of Quantum of Solace has shown, the world doesn't pull back any punches in Bond receiving his wake-up call. Casino Royale, and even the way Quantum of Solace handles this immediate continuation of the first Bond story, can easily be looked at as what happens when an eager, naive, and egotistical man who has buried within him a strong sense of compassion, empathy, and loyalty to individuals he develops strong connections for, learns the hard way that the world, to a certain extent, will not cater to him, but that they must cater to the harsh and cold realities of the world. He enters the world of being an MI6 agent with a vigor, rebelliousness, and drive, thinking that he's ready, only to be bombarded with betrayals, secret organization, guilt, and remorse. With only a select handful of relationships proving to be strong enough to either have him see the error of his ways and how he has been approaching the world, or to get him to see that, to quote Frau, there's beauty in the breakdown.
I wish I could set you free, but your prison is in there.
But while Camille was that for James in Quantum of Solace in empathetically bonding with her, no pun intended, regarding her childhood and desires for revenge while being forced to take down Dominic Green without MI6's help thanks to Quantum cutting off nearly every one of his usually reliable resources. There's one other character in the 5-movie arc that is Craig's run as Bond that not only proves strong enough to give him that support for proper change and reflection and how he should see the world, but goes through a bit of it herself thanks to the relationship the two of them have. And it's so prominent that even without initially meeting her, Camille is able to catch it and how Bond talks about her.
A woman?
Yes. But it's not what you think.
Your mother?
She likes to think so.
I mean, she only thinks that it's true because it is true. Because when it comes to Dame Judi Dench's impact in the first 3 Daniel Craig Bond films, and even Spectre, when you think about it, M is for mother. Dame Judi Dench's M being the paternal figure for Daniel Craig's Bond makes more sense than you would realize, especially when you separate her M from the Brosnan movies and look at it with the same fresh pair of eyes that Casino Royale forces you to look at the revised Bond franchise with. She's been the taskmaster for MI6 for a while, at least since the Cold War. She's already had to deal with breaking the glass ceiling, so by the time we're introduced to her in Casino Royale, she's already a bit aloof, which her reasonings are even further reinforced on Quantum of Solace when she learns that her colleagues have no problem going to bed with terrorists and shady organizations in order to have a position of power on the global scale.
If we refuse to do business with villains, we'd have almost no one to trade with.
With her promoting Bond to 00 status, she now has a lot more on her plate. He reflects her ambition of getting the job done at any cost, and learns that early on with what he does to foil the Miami airplane bombing financed by Lashif. It's both frustrating and pride-inducing for M in this case, not just because it puts her doubts of promoting him to bed, but also because it helps her establish a sense of trust and reliance for him at the cost of him superseding her authority in some cases. So now she has to juggle giving him discipline, care, and opportunity in order for proper nurture to take place, like any mother would for her child, in order to see them succeed. This is why Judi Dench's M is just as prominent a figure in the development of Craig's version of Bond as he is. While Craig plays this Bond in the first 3 films very similar to an individual who refuses to surrender his sense of control to the reality of the real world now that he has access to it, if one looks at becoming a 00 agent as the equivalent of transitioning out of adolescence and into adulthood, Dench plays M from Casino Royale to Skyfall as one who has learned to find the balance in finding a sense of self in the ever-changing world and wants those under her to avoid making the mistakes that she made. And her actions have had a positive impact on Bond as a result. If it weren't for M's constant reminder of what Vesper went through thanks to the involvement of Quantum and Spectre as a result, Bond's sense of empathy toward anyone, women or otherwise, probably wouldn't have grown or expressed over the course of the franchise as much as it has. Some would even say that M caught this behavior in Bond early on in Casino Royale before Vesper even entered the picture, when Solange, the wife of Alex Dimitrios, was murdered by Lashif at the resort after Bond seduced her into finding out about Dimitrios' Miami airport plot and seeing a lack of emotion in Bond seeing her body for the first time. The same can even be said about how Quantum of Solace highlighted the toxic connection between Bond's hedonism and womanizing ways, with how he plays into them in order to keep a sense of control established in his life whenever the world, or the mission in this case, wants to challenge it. M, rightfully so, uses Dominic Green's murder of Fields as a wake-up call for Bond to address this toxicity.
I mean, why her, Bond? She was just supposed to send you home. She worked in an office, collecting reports. Look how well your charm works, James. They'll do anything for you, won't they?
And while he still gives in to carnal pleasures from time to time, they have since been fueled by his need of control less and less, and instead with the well intentions of making sure no harm would come to them. A genuine desire to get them out of danger, even if it isn't in his immediate power. These are some of the ways that, looking at her as a mother figure, M has gone out of her way to make sure Bond is brought up right, to make sure that the world, i.e. the job, doesn't break him down. And this is even reinforced when Silva comes into play in Skyfall, who represents all of M's own toxic actions from the past, coming back to bite her in the ass.
Mommy was very bad.
And even though he would never admit it, the bond is heavily reciprocated on James's end as well. Since he was orphaned, and especially after Blofeld pulled a reverse Dio, he probably only had M's approval to seek out and gain. Which is pretty much why he handled the Dimitrios case in the first half of Casino Royale the way that he did once he was promoted to 00 status, real talk. Not only was he entering the world with "can't nobody tell me nothing" vibes regarding how he handled everything up until the Miami airport incident, but it also radiated heavy "pay attention to me, mommy" vibes as well. He wanted to be angry at the world about what Vesper did to him, but the combination of Quantum's actions and M talking him down from doing so helped him to see reason. When Silva attacked MI6 after he was presumed dead from M's call, Bond didn't come back for the job. He came back for her. And while he still had his reservations about the call M decided to make, as you can tell by how bloodshot his eyes were when he broke into her house the second time to let her know that he was alive and well, he treasured M at the end of the day, and not just up until her final breath either. Not only did discovering her final mission for him reveal to him that Blofeld's organization Spectre was behind everything since he became an MI6 agent, but James actively found a way of utilizing all of her challenges, criticisms, and advice in order to adjust and change his toxic traits and negative vices, and better reinforce the positive ones about him that he only allowed a certain amount of people to see for so long, even during his own curtain call. So when you watch the 5 Bond films Daniel Craig was in, when it comes to the importance of Judi Dench's M within them, Mum truly is the word.
Bond, I need you back.
I never left.
I'm not gonna lie, readers, despite there being a various gauge of enjoyability for every film in the series, depending on who you ask, I'm actually surprised at how well paced this way of viewing James Bond was presented in all of the films. While I definitely agree that the overconnectivity of Spectre kinda muddles the waters a bit, it surprisingly doesn't get in the way of seeing how Craig's Bond has taken all of his inner and outer experiences from the previous movies and applies it in the scenarios that follow it, which is just as important when properly showing growth and development. As someone who only really decided to get invested in everything Bond has to offer in a film, and not just the visually appealing camp it usually is known for, I'm personally glad that I decided to do so with Daniel Craig's run. Here's hoping whoever the next actor and writers are to take a whack at it can properly fill the shoes. But I digress, readers. Your homework assignment for the day. Write in the comment section below what your favorite movie is from Daniel Craig's run as James Bond. Or if you feel like sharing with the rest of the class, which out of the 5 films that initially got a bad rap that you thought upon retrospect was pretty good actually. Personally for me, that goes to Quantum of Solace. It's not beating Casino Royale or Skyfall, but it definitely took me growing up for me to put some respect on it, real talk. Whichever question you decide to answer, I'd love to know your thoughts. A huge shout out to my patrons, both big and small, for helping make this channel possible. Make sure you check out the card at the end of the video to see if you want to join, or click the link to it or any of my affiliates in the description box below. But until then, this is Readus 101. Class dismissed.